The message had been floating through space for 3,000 years. It traveled on old satellites, built by hands that had long turned to dust. The satellites were simple things, made of metal and hope, and they carried one warning in every language ever known to exist. Do not wake the hollow, do not dig beneath the dark stars. We learned too late, you still have time. Nobody listened. The Galactic Confederacy was a proud union of 12 species. They had conquered disease, hunger, and the vast distances between stars. They built stations that circled dead suns. They created ships that could cross galaxies in weeks. They believed they understood the universe and all its secrets. When their explorer ships found the old human satellites in the outer rim, they brought the recordings back to their leaders. Ambassador of the people stood before the High Council on the great station called Axis Prime. He was tall, his body made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. He played the human message for all to hear. The council chamber fell silent as the ancient voice spoke its warning. Then the silence broke into laughter. General of the slammed two of his 4 fists on the table, his gray skin wrinkled with amusement. Humans, he said, shaking his head. A species that burned themselves out in civil wars before they even reached the second level of civilization, and we are supposed to be afraid of their ghost stories. Other council members joined his laughter. The humans were a joke to them, a cautionary tale about a species that had destroyed itself before achieving anything important. Old records showed that humans had once tried to expand into space, but something had stopped them. They had retreated to their small blue planet and never left again. Of the studied the translation with her many eyes. She was old, older than most beings in the known galaxy, and she had seen empires rise and fall. But even she felt no fear from this warning. The coordinates in the message point to the umbral expanse, she said. Our scientists have detected deposits there. Enough rare material to power our civilization for 10,000 years. We have been planning mining operations in that region for decades. The vote was quick and unanimous. The council decided to ignore the human warning and proceed with the mining operation. Admiral, a decorated veteran of 3 wars, was given command of the largest fleet ever assembled for resource extraction. 200 ships, 50,000 crew members, and enough drilling equipment to crack open a moon. As the fleet prepared to depart, nobody noticed a small signal traveling in the opposite direction, toward a quiet corner of the galaxy, where a small blue planet orbited an ordinary yellow star. Earth had changed much in 3,000 years. The great cities were gone, replaced by forests and meadows. The oceans were clean again, full of life. Small villages dotted the continents, connected by simple roads and simpler technology. To any outside observer, humanity had fallen backward, abandoning their dreams of the stars. But not everything was as it seemed. Deep beneath a mountain in the eastern part of the largest continent, an old monitoring station still worked. Its computers were ancient but well-maintained. Its purpose had been passed down through generations, from parent to child, for 3,000 years. A young man named sat at the main console watching screens that had shown nothing but silence for his entire life. He was 23 years old, with messy black hair and tired eyes. This job was boring, his friends told him. Nothing ever happened. The universe had forgotten about Earth, and that was probably for the best. Then the alert came. Sat up straight, his heart suddenly beating fast. A red light flashed on his screen, accompanied by a sound he had only heard in training simulations. Someone had reached the umbral expanse. Someone was digging. He pressed the communication button with shaking fingers. "Supervisor, please come to the monitoring room. We have a situation." Arrived within minutes. She was 45 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and the calm face of someone who had spent her life waiting for something she hoped would never come. She looked at the screen, and her calm face cracked. "Show me the details," she said quietly. pulled up the data. 200 ships had entered the Forbidden Zone. They were drilling into the third planet, breaking through the crust, going deeper and deeper towards something that should never be disturbed. They found our warnings, said. The satellites recorded their response. They laughed at us. They called us failures. Closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she walked to a corner of the room where an old cabinet stood covered in dust. She opened it and pulled out a device that looked like a metal sphere covered in symbols. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. He shook his head. "This is the emergency beacon. It was built 12,000 years ago after the First Awakening. It sends a message to every human settlement in the galaxy, on every colony ship still traveling between stars, to every hidden base our ancestors built before they decided to sleep." She held the sphere carefully, like it might break. "When I activate this, everything changes. The peace we have known for 3,000 years will end. We will have to remember who we were, and who we might have to become again." "What choice do we have?" asked. Looked at the screen at the 200 ships digging toward their own destruction. "They will learn soon enough. The Hollow do not forgive. The Hollow do not forget. And when the screaming starts, when entire worlds begin to vanish from memory itself, they will come to us. They will beg for help." She activated the beacon. Across the planet, in hidden bunkers and forgotten archives, ancient systems began to wake. Men and women who had lived quiet lives as farmers and teachers received messages on devices their families had kept for generations. "They actually did it," whispered, watching the data stream across her screen. "The fools actually did it." Stared at the sphere in her hands, its symbols now glowing with soft light. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," said, "and we prepare. Because when the Hollow wake, the universe will remember why it should have listened to the humans." She turned and walked toward the door, her steps heavy with the weight of knowledge that had been passed down for 12,000 years. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's warning. Soon, it would learn that some jokes have a very dark ending. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, and watched his fleet work. 200 ships surrounded the dead planet, their drilling machines cutting through rock and metal like knives through soft bread. The planet had no name, only a number, XR7741. It was gray, lifeless, and ugly, but beneath its surface lay treasure beyond imagination. "Report," commanded. His science officer, lieutenant, checked her instruments. She was young for her position, with smooth blue skin and 4 eyes that never missed a detail. "We have reached a depth of 40 kilometers, Admiral. The deposits are exactly where we predicted. At this rate, we will begin extraction within 6 hours. Allowed himself a small smile. This mission would make him a legend. The wealth they pulled from this dead rock would fuel the Confederacy for generations. His name would be remembered forever. "Continue drilling," he ordered. "I want extraction to begin ahead of schedule." The drills pushed deeper, 50 kilometers, 60, 70. At 80 kilometers, something changed. Frowned at her screen. "Admiral, I am reading something strange. The rock composition is different at this depth." "Different how?" "It is not rock anymore, sir. The material is organic. It appears to be some kind of tissue like the inside of a living creature." Her 4 eyes widened. "Admiral, the planet's core is not a core. It is alive." Before could respond, the drilling stopped. Not because of any order, but because there was nothing left to drill. The ground beneath the machines had simply vanished, replaced by a hole that led down into perfect darkness. And from that darkness, something rose. The first sign was the silence. Every communication channel went dead. Every sensor stopped working. The stars themselves seemed to dim, as if someone was slowly turning off the lights of the universe. Then came the shapes. They rose from the hole in the planet, forms that made no sense to any eye that tried to look at them. They were not creatures in any normal meaning of the word. They were holes in reality, spaces where existence had decided to stop. Looking at them caused pain, not in the eyes but in the mind, as if the brain itself was rejecting what it saw. The ship closest to the planet was It was a heavy cruiser with a crew of 300, armed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. It simply stopped existing. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no debris. One moment it was there, floating in space like it had for 20 years. The next moment it was gone, and not just gone from that spot in space. It was gone from everywhere, gone from memory. The navigator suddenly looked confused. "Admiral," he said slowly, "there is something wrong with our fleet count. My records say we brought 200 ships, but I can only count 199. "What happened to the missing ship?" demanded. Stared at his screen, his face pale. I do not know, sir. I cannot remember. I know there should be another ship, but I cannot picture it. I cannot remember its name or who served on it." The shapes continued to rise. They spread across space like ink spreading through water, beautiful and terrible. Where they passed, things disappeared. Stars, asteroids, and ships, all vanishing as if they had never been born. "All ships retreat," shouted into his communicator. "Maximum speed, get away from this system." The fleet tried to run. 199 ships turned their engines to full power and raced toward the edge of the system. Behind them, the shapes followed, patient and unstoppable. Ships vanished one by one. First the slowest, then the damaged, then the simply unlucky. Each disappearance left a hole in memory, a gap where a ship and its crew had once existed. By the time the survivors reached safe space, only 3 ships remained. Admiral sat in his command chair, his hands shaking. He had started this mission with 50,000 crew members under his command. Now he had perhaps 200, and the worst part was that he could not remember the faces of the ones he had lost. He knew they had existed. He knew he had known them, but their names, their voices, their lives were simply gone, erased from the universe itself. "Send a message to Axis Prime," he said, his voice hollow. Tell them the humans were right. Tell them we woke something that should have stayed asleep." On Axis Prime, the council gathered in emergency session. The mood was very different from before. No one laughed now. No one made jokes about the foolish humans and their silly warnings. Read the reports with growing horror. Entire systems near the umbral expanse were going dark, their stars vanishing from the sky as if they had never existed. Refugee ships were arriving at Confederate stations, their crews babbling about shapes that ate reality, about memories being stolen from their minds. "What are these things?" General demanded. His voice was not arrogant anymore, it was afraid. "We do not know," said the chief scientist, a small being covered in fur. "They do not match any species in our records. They do not appear to obey the laws of physics as we understand them. They exist outside of time, outside of space, outside of everything we know. Can we fight them?" "We have tried. Our weapons pass through them without effect. When we use our strongest bombs, they simply absorb the energy, and every time we attack them, they grow stronger." Stood up, her old body was tired, but her mind was sharp. "There is one option we have not considered," she said. "The humans. They sent those warnings 3,000 years ago. They knew about these things before we did. They must have found a way to survive." "The humans are primitives," said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They live in villages. They have no fleet, no weapons." "And yet they are still alive," replied. "The Hollow, as they called them, nearly destroyed every advanced civilization in this galaxy 12,000 years ago. The humans survived. Their planet is still there. Their people are still breathing. That is more than we may be able to say soon if we do not find answers." The council voted again. This time there was no arrogance. This time they decided to send a ship to Earth to find the descendants of those who had sent the warning and to beg for their help. As the fastest courier ship in the fleet prepared to depart, the shapes continued their spread across the galaxy. They moved slowly, almost lazily, as if they had all the time in the universe. And perhaps they did. They had slept for 4 billion years. They were in no hurry. The screaming had only just begun. The courier ship Whisper was the fastest vessel in the Confederacy. Its captain, a young named, had been given simple orders: fly to Earth, find the humans, and bring back anything that could save them from the hollow. He was not told what to expect. He was not prepared for what he found. Earth appeared on his sensors as a small blue dot, circling a yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. As he approached, searched for signs of civilization. He looked for orbital stations, defense platforms, communication networks, and all the markers of an advanced species. He found nothing. No stations, no platforms, no satellites except for the ancient warning beacons that still broadcast their message into the void. Just a planet covered in clouds and water, looking exactly as the old records described it from 12,000 years ago. Perhaps they are all dead, his navigator suggested. Shook his head. The council confirmed life signs. There are billions of humans down there. They simply choose to hide their technology. He guided the Whisper down through the atmosphere, following the strongest life signal. The ship broke through the clouds and saw forests spreading to the horizon, rivers cutting through valleys, and mountains rising toward the sky. It was beautiful in a simple way, untouched by the metal and glass that covered most civilized worlds. The ship landed in a clearing near a small village, stepped outside, his crystal body catching the sunlight, and waited. He did not wait long. A group of humans emerged from the trees. They walked calmly, without fear, as if the arrival of an alien ship was nothing unusual. At their head was a woman with gray-streaked black hair and a face that showed no surprise. Behind her came others, young and old, men and women, all dressed in simple clothes that could have belonged to any era in human history. "You ignored the warning," the woman said. "It was not a question." Lowered his head in what he hoped was a gesture of respect. "We did, and now we are paying the price. The hollow are spreading across the galaxy. Entire systems are vanishing. We do not know how to stop them." The woman nodded slowly. We have been expecting you. Come with us." She turned and walked back toward the forest, followed, his long crystal legs making soft sounds in the grass. The other humans fell into step around him, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply present. They walked for an hour through the woods until they reached a mountain that rose above the trees like a sleeping giant. At its base was an entrance carved from stone, ancient and worn by time. Symbols marked the doorway, symbols that did not recognize from any language in the Confederate database. Inside, the mountain was hollow. Great halls stretched into darkness, lit by soft lights that seemed to have no source. The walls were covered with carvings and paintings, showing scenes of war and destruction that made Crystal's heart grow cold. "What is this place?" he asked. "This is the archive," said an old man who stepped forward from the shadows. His name was, and his face was a map of wrinkles and wisdom. "Here we keep the memory of what was, and what must never be again." He led deeper into the mountain, past chambers filled with ancient machines and artifacts from a time when humanity had reached for the stars, past libraries holding books and data cores containing knowledge that predated the Confederacy by thousands of years. Finally, they reached a great circular room at the heart of the mountain. In the center stood a platform, and on the platform was a chair. Sitting in the chair was a young woman named. She had short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to look through rather than at him. "Tell him," said Tu, "tell him what we are." The old man sat down on a stone bench and folded his hands. 12,000 years ago," he began, "humanity was like you. We were proud. We were arrogant. We built great ships and spread across the galaxy, taking whatever we wanted, going wherever we pleased. We thought we were the masters of the universe." He paused, his old eyes growing distant. "We found the hollow in a system we called paradise. It was rich in resources, beautiful beyond description. We sent our best scientists to study it, our miners to extract its wealth. We did not listen to the warnings. We did not respect the signs. We dug too deep and we woke them. Felt a chill run through his crystal body. What happened? They nearly erased us. Not just our bodies, but our history, our meaning, our very existence. Every record of human achievement was wiped away. Every memory of our ancestors became fog. We were becoming ghosts in our own timeline, disappearing from the universe as if we had never been born. But you survived, said. Your planet is still here. Your people are still alive. Yes, spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but carried weight that filled the chamber. We survived, but not through victory, not through weapons or clever tactics. She stood from her chair and walked toward until she stood directly in front of him. Despite her small size, she seemed larger than anyone he had ever met. We made a deal, she said. A deal with those things. The Hollow are not monsters, explained. They are not evil. They simply exist for a purpose that we do not fully understand. They sleep beneath the dark places of the universe, and they wake when a species grows too powerful, too fast. They prune the garden of reality, cutting back civilizations that threaten the balance. And what deal could possibly satisfy such beings? Looked at, who nodded, then she turned back to. We gave them a promise, we gave them a sacrifice, and we gave up our dreams of empire forever. Her dark eyes held his. Tomorrow we will show you what that sacrifice looks like, but tonight you should rest. You will need your strength for what comes next. She walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the archive. Stood alone in the great chamber, surrounded by the weight of 12,000 years of sorrow. He had come looking for weapons, for technology, for some clever solution that would save his people. He was beginning to understand that the humans might offer something very different. Something far more terrible. And far more effective. Morning came to the mountain with pale light filtering through cracks in the ancient stone. Had not slept, though his kind did not truly need sleep in the way other species did. He had spent the night thinking about what had said. A deal. A sacrifice. Words that seemed simple but carried darkness beneath their surface. Came for him at dawn. She led him deeper into the archive, down passages that grew older and stranger with every step. The carvings on the walls showed scenes of human history, cities burning, ships dying in the void, people screaming at shapes that made no sense. And then slowly, the images changed. They showed humans kneeling, praying, offering something invisible to something vast and terrible. What are they giving? Asked, pointing at one carving. Everything that mattered, replied. Watch. They descended a final staircase and emerged into a chamber unlike anything had ever seen. The room was perfectly round, its walls covered in crystals that glowed with soft blue light. In the center floated a woman. She hung in the air without any visible support, her body wrapped in light that seemed to come from inside her rather than outside. Her eyes were open but saw nothing in this world. Her mouth moved slightly, as if speaking words too quiet to hear. She looked young, perhaps 30 years old by human standards, but something about her presence felt ancient beyond measure. This is, said, stepping out from behind one of the crystal pillars. She is the anchor. Stared at the floating woman. I do not understand. Entered the chamber, his old bones creaking with the effort. He sat on a stone and began to explain. 12,000 years ago, when the Hollow were consuming our civilization, a group of our minds made contact with them. Not through words or signals, but through something deeper. They touched the minds of the Hollow and learned what they wanted. What did they want? Balance. The Hollow believe that civilizations grow too fast, reach too high, take too much. They exist to cut back the growth, to keep the garden of reality from choking itself. They saw humanity as a weed that needed to be pulled. Nodded slowly, and you convinced them otherwise. We gave them a choice. We offered them a bridge, a connection between our reality and theirs. A human mind that would exist in both places at once, constantly reminding them that we had chosen peace, chosen to remain small, chosen to stop reaching for the stars. The old man pointed at its floating form. She volunteered. She was brilliant, brave, and full of love for her people. She agreed to become the anchor to hold the door between our worlds closed through nothing but the strength of her consciousness. For 12,000 years she has floated here, neither alive nor dead, neither sleeping nor awake. She feels every moment of that time, every second, every heartbeat. Felt something he had never felt before. His people, were beings of crystal and light. They did not understand physical pain or emotional suffering the way other species did. But looking at, he felt a shadow of what she must be experiencing. "That is monstrous," he whispered. "That is the price," said. Her voice was hard, but her eyes showed pain. "Every human alive feels a piece of her sacrifice. We carry her sorrow with us always, a weight on our hearts that never goes away. It is why we never expanded again, why we stayed on Earth, why we built no more empires. The cost of power is too high when you know what it truly takes to pay." Turned away from the floating woman. "And you expect us to do the same, to sacrifice someone to become an anchor?" "No," said firmly. "We would never ask that of you. What did cannot be forced or demanded. It can only be offered freely, with full understanding of what it means. And even then, it is a cruelty that should never have been necessary." "Then what can you offer us? The Hollow are destroying everything. My people are dying, vanishing, being erased from existence. If you cannot give us an anchor, what can you give?" Walked to a cabinet built into the chamber wall and opened it. Inside were rows of small metal devices, each one glowing with the same soft blue light that surrounded. "These are fragments," she said, picking one up. "Each one contains a tiny piece of consciousness, her 12,000 years of meditation on what it means to exist. When you carry one of these, you feel what she feels. Not all of it, just a small part, but enough." "Enough for what?" "The Hollow feed on emptiness," explained. "They consume meaning, purpose, the very essence of what makes things real, but they cannot digest certain things. They cannot swallow hope that is strong enough. They cannot erase love that is deep enough. They cannot unmake purpose that is clear enough." She pressed the device into his crystal hand. "When you face the Hollow, you must not think of victory. You must not think of survival. You must think of why you exist. Your family, your home, your hopes and dreams and loves. Fill yourself with meaning so completely that there is no room for emptiness. And when the Hollow try to consume you, they will choke." Looked at the small device in his hand. It felt warm, almost alive. "This will work." "It worked for us," said. "We drove the Hollow back 12,000 years ago using nothing but our refusal to be erased. We held onto our memories so tightly that even beings who exist outside of time could not tear them away." "But there is a cost," added quietly. "Whoever carries a fragment will feel pain. 12,000 years of isolation, of suffering, of endless consciousness without rest. Some minds will break. Some will go mad. We are not asking you to survive. We are asking you to remember, no matter what it costs." Stood in silence for a long moment. Then he closed his crystal fingers around the fragment. "My people have a saying," he said. "The light casts the darkest shadow. I did not understand it until now." He looked at, floating in her endless vigil. "We will carry your pain," he said to her, though she could not hear. "We will remember for you, and if we survive, we will find a way to give you peace." Smiled, the first real smile had seen on her face. "Then let us prepare for war," she said. "A war unlike any your confederacy has ever fought. A war where the only weapon is the human heart." They left the chamber together, carrying the hope of two civilizations in their hands. Behind them, continued to float in her prison of light, holding back the darkness for just a little longer. The War Council gathered on Axis Prime, the largest meeting of species in Confederate history. Representatives from all 12 races sat in the great chamber, their faces showing fear, confusion, and desperate hope. At the front of the room stood the human delegation, and who had traveled from Earth to help explain what was coming. "Let me be clear," said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "We are not offering you weapons. We are not giving you technology that will destroy the Hollow. Such things do not exist. The Hollow cannot be killed. They cannot be defeated in any way you understand." Murmurs spread through the council. General, his 4 arms crossed, leaned forward. "Then what good are you? Why did we bring you here?" "Because we can teach you to survive," answered. "We can teach you to hold the line until the Hollow choose to sleep again." She nodded to, who stepped forward carrying a case filled with the fragment devices. He opened it, revealing hundreds of the small glowing objects. "These are anchors," explained. His voice was nervous but steady. "Each one connects the carrier to our anchor on Earth. When you hold one and focus your mind on the things that give your life meaning, you create a barrier that the Hollow cannot easily break." Admiral, who had survived the first encounter with the Hollow, stood from his seat. His face was haunted, his eyes carrying shadows that had not been there before. "I watched my fleet disappear," he said quietly. "I felt my memories being torn away, my friends being erased from existence. You are telling me that a small metal ball will protect against that?" "No," said honestly. "Nothing will fully protect you. The Hollow are beyond our understanding, but the fragments give you a chance. They give you something to hold onto when the darkness comes." She walked to the center of the room. "I will not lie to you. Many of you will die. Many more will wish they had died. Carrying a fragment means feeling the pain of our anchor, a woman who has suffered for 12,000 years without rest. Your minds will scream. Your hearts will break. But if you hold on, if you refuse to let go of who you are and what you love, the Hollow cannot consume you." The chamber fell silent. Then slowly, Admiral walked forward. He took a fragment from his case and held it in his palm. For a moment his face twisted with pain. His eyes went wide, and a sound escaped his throat that was half sob, half scream. But he did not drop the fragment. His hand closed around it, and his expression slowly hardened into something like determination. "I had a daughter," he said. "She was born 3 days before I left on the mining mission. I have thought of nothing but her face since I escaped the Hollow. If carrying this pain means I might see her again, then I will carry it." One by one, other officers and soldiers came forward. They took fragments, and each one experienced a moment of agony as the connection to opened in their minds. Some fell to their knees. Some cried out. A few collapsed entirely and had to be carried away. But most held on. Within a week, the Confederate fleet was ready. Thousands of ships gathered at the edge of the umbral expanse, facing the darkness that had already consumed 100 star systems. At the front of the fleet was the rebuilt, with Admiral at the command. Beside him stood, who had refused to stay behind on Earth. "Remember," she told him as they prepared to jump into battle, "do not think of winning. Do not think of survival. Think only of why you fight. Let your purpose fill you until there is no room for doubt." The fleet jumped. They emerged in a system that no longer had a name, its sun dimmed to a faint red glow. The Hollow were waiting. They rose from the darkness between the stars, shapes that hurt to look at, forms that existed in dimensions that made no sense. They stretched across the void like living shadows, reaching for the ships with tendrils made of pure emptiness. "All ships," commanded, "activate your fragments, focus on your purpose, hold the line." Across the fleet, thousands of beings closed their eyes and thought of home. They thought of families waiting for them, of children they hoped to see grow up, of lovers they had left behind. They thought of the worlds they wanted to protect, the futures they wanted to build, the simple fact that they existed and refused to stop existing. The Hollow reached the first ships. The tendrils wrapped around metal hulls, trying to erase them from reality. But something had changed. The ships flickered but did not vanish. The crews screamed in pain but did not forget who they were. The hollow pushed harder, and the beings in the ships pushed back, their minds blazing with memory and meaning. Admiral stood at the front of his bridge, his fragment burning in his hand. He felt 12,000 years of suffering flooding through him, and he met it with his own pain, his own hope, his own desperate love for a daughter he barely knew. "You will not take us," he whispered. "You will not erase us. We are real, we matter, and we will not disappear." Across the fleet, others did the same. And all the other species of the Confederacy, all of them holding onto their identities with everything they had. And slowly, impossibly, the hollow began to retreat. Not quickly, not easily. The battle lasted for 3 days and hundreds of ships were lost despite everything. But for every ship that vanished, 10 more held their ground. The hollow screamed, a sound that existed in no frequency but was felt in every soul, and they pulled back. They returned to the darkness between the stars, sinking back into their ancient sleep. The galaxy had not defeated them. No one could truly defeat the hollow, but the galaxy had reminded them that some things were too meaningful to erase, some purposes were too strong to break, some memories were too precious to steal. When the fleet returned to Axis Prime, they were met with celebrations that lasted for weeks. But the humans did not celebrate. Traveled back to Earth, to the chamber beneath the mountain. She stood before who still floated in her prison of light. "We shared your burden," said softly. "Thousands of beings across the galaxy felt what you feel, even if only for a moment. You are not alone anymore." For the first time in 12,000 years, something changed in its expression. Her lips moved, forming words that no one could hear, but understood. A single tear rolled down his cheek and evaporated in the light that surrounded her. On Axis Prime, the Council passed a new resolution. They would build beacon networks across the galaxy, broadcasting the human warning to every corner of known space. But they would add something new, their own testimony. "We were arrogant, we were wrong. The humans tried to save us and we laughed. Listen to the old warnings. Listen to the small voices. The universe is older than your pride." The message spread across the stars, a reminder to future generations that some warnings should never be ignored. And on quiet Earth, humanity continued its simple life, tending their gardens and raising their children, carrying the weight of their sacrifice with dignity and grace. They had saved the galaxy not through strength, but through sorrow. Not through weapons, but through memory. And the universe would never laugh at them again.